September 14, 2025 in Russia, way up north in a region called Leningrad Oblast. In this place, there's a town called Kirishi. Kirishi isn't famous for its beaches or its fancy museums. It's famous for one thing and one thing only, a building. It's called the Kirishi Refinery. Let's be honest, that's a mouthful. It sounds like something a cat would cough up. So the cool kids, they just call it KINEF. Now, when I say KINEF is a building, I'm not being fair. KINEF is not a building. KINEF is a monster. It's a gigantic, sprawling city made of metal pipes, tall towers that touch the clouds, and huge round tanks that look like giant metallic onions. It stretches for as far as you can see, humming and buzzing and steaming day and night. Think of KINEF as a giant, industrial-sized smoothie machine, but instead of fruits and yogurt, it drinks oil. Gross, black, gooey crude oil, and it drinks a lot of it. Every single day, this monster gets thirsty for 400,000 barrels of oil. A barrel is about the size of a really big trash can. So we're talking 400,000 big trash cans full of oil every single day. That's enough to fill over 1,500 swimming pools. And what does it do with all this goop? It churns it and burns it and cooks it, and through some crazy science magic, it spits out all the stuff that makes the modern world go round. We're talking gasoline for cars, diesel for trucks and trains, and most importantly for our story, jet fuel for fighter jets and tanks. This refinery, KINEF, is one of the two biggest and most important oil smoothie machines in all of Russia. KINEF wasn't just making fuel, it was making money. Piles and piles of money that the Russian government was using to pay for its war in Ukraine. And because it was so important, you'd think it would be super safe, right? Well, it thought so too. It was located almost 500 miles away from the fighting in Ukraine. That's like being in New York and worrying about a waters balloon fight in Ohio. KINEF felt safe. It felt smug. It sat there in the chilly northern air. A big, fat, happy, untouchable giant. It was about to have a very, very bad day, because while the giant was snoozing and dreaming of its next oil smoothie, something was happening far, far to the south. In Ukraine, a few brave engineers had been cooking up a plan, a beautifully simple and wonderfully cheeky plan. You see, the Russian military is like a giant, grumpy bear. It's huge, it's powerful, and it has very expensive, very sharp claws called missiles and jets. Ukraine, in this story, is like a tiny, clever, and incredibly annoying chihuahua. The chihuahua knows it can't win a wrestling match with the bear. That would be silly, but what it can do is sneak up and nip the bear on its big, sensitive nose, over and over and over again. The chihuahua's teeth, in this case, were drones. Now, these aren't your fancy billion-dollar military drones you see in movies. No, these were more like lawnmowers that learned how to fly. They were put together with whatever parts that they could find, weighed about as much as a large German shepherd, and had a small engine that went buzz, buzz, buzz. But here's the important part. They packed these flying lawnmowers with explosives. They were basically angry, flying pizzas of doom, programmed with one simple instruction: fly a very long way and deliver a very spicy surprise to a very specific address. Their journey was an adventure in itself. They had to fly 500 miles across Russia, a country that supposedly had the best air defense system in the world. They had all these fancy gadgets with names like S-400 and Pantsir, designed to shoot anything out of the sky. These systems are like the fanciest laser security grid in a museum, meant to stop a cool super spy in a tuxedo. But our little drones weren't super spies. They were mice. They flew low to the ground, scurrying along in the dark, too small and too sneaky for the big, clumsy laser grid to notice. They just kept buzzing along, little dots of determination crossing a vast and hostile landscape, getting closer and closer. Back at the KINEF refinery, the night shift workers were probably on their third cup of coffee. The control rooms were filled with the gentle glow of computer screens showing that everything was fine. The giant was sleeping peacefully. Then a few people living near the refinery heard it, a faint, weird buzzing sound. It got louder and louder, like an angry mosquito the size of a car was heading right for them. And then, kablamo! A flash of brilliant white light lit up the entire countryside, followed a heartbeat later by a deep, chest-thumping boom that shook houses for miles around. The night sky, which should have been dark, suddenly looked like the sun had decided to rise 3 hours early, but in the wrong spot, and in a very, very bad mood. A monstrous ball of orange flame erupted from the center of the refinery, a terrifying flower of fire climbing into the air, painting the clouds orange and red. Of course, the local governor, a man named Alexander Drozdenko, immediately jumped on his phone to tell everyone that everything was fine. His message was hilarious. He said, "Our heroic air defense shot down 3 drones. Hooray for us." Then he added, almost as if he'd forgotten, "Oh, and a little bit of wreckage from one of the drones. Well, it sort of tripped and fell onto the refinery and started a teensy-weensy fire. But don't worry, we put it out with a bucket of water. No one was hurt. Nothing to see here, people. Go back to sleep." A teensy-weensy fire. Right, because at the exact same time he was typing that, videos were popping up all over the internet from people who lived nearby. And their videos didn't show a teensy-weensy fire. They showed an inferno, a raging, roaring monster of a fire that looked like a volcano had just erupted in the middle of the refinery. And then you won't believe what happened next. The real story started to leak out. A news agency called Reuters talked to a couple of people who actually worked inside the Russian oil industry. These were the guys who knew what was really going on. And they weren't talking about a small fire. They said that the little flying lawnmower hadn't just tripped and fell. It had flown with pinpoint, laser-like accuracy and slammed directly into one of the most important parts of the entire refinery. It hit what's called a primary oil processing unit. Think about our smoothie machine analogy. The primary processing unit is the main blender. It's the part that takes the gross, raw oil and does the first, most important step of turning it into useful stuff. Hitting it is like taking a sledgehammer to the main oven in a giant pizza restaurant. You can still toss salads in the back, but you can't make any pizzas. And this one unit, this one main blender, was responsible for almost 40% of everything the KINEF refinery did. In one fiery instant, with one 250-kilogram package of bad news, nearly half of the giant's power had been switched off. The damage was bad, really bad. The furnace inside the unit was wrecked. The whole thing had to be shut down completely. Governor Drozdenko's "nothing to see here" was actually a holy moly, our giant money-making machine is broken catastrophe. The experts who talked to Reuters gave their first guess on how long it would take to fix it. 1 month. A whole month where one of Russia's biggest and baddest refineries would be operating like a grumpy old man with a broken hip, limping along at just over half power. A whole month where millions and millions of barrels of gasoline and diesel would simply not get made. This one little chihuahua bite was causing the big Russian bear a very big, very painful headache. And the headache was about to get worse, because this wasn't just about one refinery. The Ukrainian drone campaign had been going on for months. They were hitting refineries all over Russia, and it was working. Suddenly, Russia, a country that sells oil and gas to the whole world, was running out of gas for its own people. Imagine a donut shop that has no more donuts, or a water park with no more water. It was that embarrassing. Farmers in the south couldn't get enough diesel for their tractors to harvest the crops. Truck drivers were stuck in long lines at gas stations. The government in Moscow started to panic. In a move that showed just how scared they were, they did something crazy. They banned the export of their own gasoline and diesel. They put a giant "closed for business" sign on their international gas station, just so they could keep enough fuel for themselves. It was a giant, flashing sign to the world that said, "Help! The Chihuahuas are nipping us, and it really, really hurts." So, back at our poor, wounded giant, KINEF, a massive, frantic repair operation began. Picture it. Guys in hard hats running around with blueprints, yelling into phones, sparks flying from welding torches. They were in a race against time. The bosses in Moscow were screaming at them to get the refinery fixed, and fast. They had 1 month. The clock was ticking. They worked day and night under the harsh glare of temporary floodlights. The calm, productive hum of the refinery had been replaced by the chaotic noise of construction and repair. They were trying to perform emergency surgery on a billion-dollar patient. They were so focused on fixing the old damage, they never imagined the enemy was already planning a sequel. Fast forward to October 4th, 20. In less than a month, the repair crews were still hard at work, covered in grease and stress. They were probably starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe, just maybe, they could get the main blender working again soon. Then, on another dark and quiet night, they heard it again. That sound. That horrible familiar buzz, buzz, buzz. But this time, it wasn't just one, it was a whole swarm. Drozdenko must have just sighed and slumped over his desk before writing his next message. This time, he announced that the city of Kirishi had been targeted by 7 drones. And once again, he tried to be sneaky about it, saying a fire had started in an industrial zone. An industrial zone. That's like saying a whale just splashed in a body of water. He just couldn't bring himself to say the name of the refinery again. But Ukraine's military didn't have a problem with it. They posted a very simple, very clear message on social media for the whole world to see. It said, "We hit the Kirishi oil refinery again. It went boom. We're checking the results." Results are being checked. It's such a calm, cool phrase. But it was absolutely terrifying for Russia. It was the ultimate schoolyard taunt. It was like they were saying, "Hey, remember that giant, expensive thing you were fixing? Well, we broke it again. Let us know how the new repairs go. We've got plenty more of these flying lawnmowers, and we're getting really good at aiming them." This second attack was the punchline to a very, very expensive joke. It wasn't just about breaking the machine anymore. It was about breaking the spirit of the people trying to fix it. Imagine being a worker at KINEF now. Every time you hear a lawnmower start up in the distance, you probably jump out of your skin. The message was crystal clear. This place is not safe. We can hit you whenever we want. You can repair it, and we will just come back and break it again. The story of the Kirishi Refinery is the story of the whole war in a nutshell. It's the story of a big, arrogant giant who thought it was invincible, getting completely outsmarted by a small, clever underdog with a brilliant plan. It proves that in a fight, it's not always about having the biggest muscles or the most expensive toys. Sometimes, all you need is a bit of ingenuity, a lot of courage, and a few angry flying pizzas of doom. The once proud KINEF, the giant that drank 400,000 barrels of oil a day, was left broken, burning, and constantly looking over its shoulder, forever listening for that dreaded buzz, buzz, buzz in the night sky.